Yeah, it was May 25th of 1945. We were on a night raid with incendiary weapons against Japan, Tokyo in particular. Yeah. It led to a tremendous conflagration. Over 300,000 Japanese died that night in the flames. The 20th Air Force lost, I think, was 180 crew members that night. Airplane commanders, pilots, co-pilots, crew members, gunners, navigators, bombardiers. 180 was a big loss. It was a 6% loss, and 6% generally was the highest percentage loss in both the Pacific and in the 8th Air Force in England. Those were the high averages of losses for missions. The loss was hard to take for many. Our crew was one because a near miss by an anti-aircraft shell killed our tail gunner. We didn't know he was killed. We had moved him to the radar room, and with the help of the radio operator, who was the first aid man for our crew, had worked on the tail gunner, but they told us after the mission he had probably died within a few minutes of being hit.
Can you take us into more detail about that actual mission? What you remember seeing yourself and what your role was that night?
Because it was a night mission, we were using the radar extensively for navigation. Of course, the navigator was working, but basically he was getting his information from my radar. So we used the radar very much. We flew at an altitude of 3,100 feet is my memory. So we're talking a half mile basically in the air, which is a rather low altitude to be flying at night, become an easy target if there are fighter planes out there. But we saw very few fighters, some balls of fire or whatever we called them. It was some sort of, they had some sort of weapon that they were trying out probably, but it was essentially a flying bomb. Yeah, but there was not a lot of damage when in our bomb group. Our plane had the most damage, and we were just riddled from the radar room on back. That's where the tail gunner, of course, was killed back there. My log shows that the guards, our gunners, whose job generally in a mission, if there was no enemy action, one thing was to keep track of enemy searchlights, locations, and number. And they recorded that in our bomb run of almost 10 minutes, they recorded 8 or 9, 10 searchlights operating at the same time and handing off from one to another group of searchlights. So there was constant searchlight on you. you could read a newspaper in the radar compartment, or the pilot and co-pilot could read it. They had to wear sunglasses or some sort of shielding over their eyes, or just not look down or look out, and just look at their instruments. And the navigator and bombardier could sort of keep track on how the mission was going as far as maintaining altitude and in the proper direction, and make corrections to the pilot and co-pilot.
While your plane was in the enemy searchlights, did you all receive enemy fire?
Yeah, that was at the time when we had been in the searchlights for some time. But I cannot tell you if there was a bang. Certainly what there was sudden lighting, additional lighting back there, and an explosion, a definite explosion, a flash. And
where did it hit your plane?
Pardon?
Where did it hit your plane?
Behind and to the right. May have been a few holes due to that, but more of the holes were due to our exploding ammunition back near the tail. Because when that occurred, the ammunition that was back near tail began exploding. And that made holes going out. After we had this near miss of an anti-aircraft weapon to the right of our plane and behind it, but very close to the tail, after that, of course, there was a lot of confusion on the plane. A lot of equipment was knocked out. The co-pilot screws, controls were knocked complete out. That's what happened is the controls were actuated by hydraulic lines, and his lines were cut completely. So he had no control. Only the pilot had complete control, and the pilot flew the plane all the way back to Guam, about 7 hours, with only his manual control of the plane and some control with the throttles. After we were hit, I told the pilot, that we had been hit back there. It looked like it was holding together, and I said, I'm going back and look at Matt. Matt was a tail gunner, and he tried to stop me, but I was already laid down, taken my headset off, and had gone on back. And with the help of the radio operator, who is also our first aid man, and whose normal combat position, the radio operator, is in the back of the plane rather than the front of the plane where his normal position is. So with his help, we took Matt up into the radar room, put him on the floor, tried to resuscitate him, and a couple of people just kept working at him for hours, hoping to see. Maybe they thought they saw some breath on a mirror or something. People were trying to, but some guys, a couple of gunners, given up completely, said, I don't know what you're fooling with, and they were right, because when we got back, the medic in charge at our landing point and where we kept our airplane looked at Matt and said he couldn't have lived more than a few minutes.
What were Matt's injuries? What could you see?
Well, the thing is that he had put on his armor because he was sitting in a seat in a little pressurized compartment. The plane forward, the radar room forward there was pressurized, but in between was a block of maybe 30 feet that wasn't pressurized. So Matt had on his armor, front and back. It was open a little along the side, and his initial wounds were right along between the strips of armor, front and back, left side, because he was looking back, facing left. That is, his gunner, as his gunners, he was ready to shoot back. His arms were raised to operate the weapon, and so there was a place for the anti-aircraft fire to get in close to his arm and to his body, because the rest had the armor on. The tail gunner's position was a pressurized position. So to get to the tail gunner's actual position, he had to open a pressurized door, which was secured, but could be unsecured because there were handles on the outside, but he could secure it himself from the inside. So the tail gunner's position was about on the center line of the plane, looking back from the radar room. And the tail gunner, he had that door behind him, was a pressurized door. And beside that door, in one place, I don't know where else, within an arm's length, there was a fire axe. I took that fire axe. The door was partially open by the blast, I guess, and I chopped one hinge and then took the door, what was left. Of course, these were aluminum hinges, so they're not good in tensile strength. I guess that's what I'm saying. Is it tensile strength in any event? And then I could twist it and break it off. Break the door off, because aluminum hinges are easily fractured. They have a lot of residual strength, but only when they're used as normal.
Thank you for explaining that. So after you broke off the door, what did you see when you came into the tail gunner's compartment?
You don't come in, you just look in, because he's right there on the other side of the door.
Sure.
Could see the door, could see him leaning over. I got Volkmar, who's also our first aid man, to come up too and take a quick look at him. He says he's gone, which was pretty clear from his injuries in any event. But the two of us, Volkmar did the most of the work, but the two of us got him out into this unpressurized area, and from there up into the radar room, put him on the floor of the radar room, and he went the rest of the way there on the floor of the radar room. He was offloaded by a forklift on our hard stand, on our revetment. There was a corpsman there. They got involved in that sort of stuff. But all bomb groups had a small medical detachment. We did. The bigger group had then the wing would have a bigger outfit, and there would be a hospital, a wing, a hospital. We would have a small dispensary in the bomb group. But I remember this guy, we were unloading, somebody was unloading Matt using the forklift, but we were on our revetment. You understand, a circular hard stand in which was assigned to our plane. And so when we taxied back in, that's where we parked. We had no reason not keep going. And that corpsman was with the guys who were getting mad out, checking them over, confirming death. I think there was a medic there. But the corpsman said something. He said, I can write you guys up for Purple Hearts. He said, about 3 of us were injured in the bouncing around that we took. He said that was combat injury. We didn't think twice of it. We said no. But Matt got his the hard way.